the old gods fall, and from their blood I rise and lay waste to all that I despise. And when I shred your souls, drink deep in your lives, I hear you scream for mercy as you entreat your faithless gods for death's release. But all the gods whose fealty you swear cannot protect you here. And like the dead gods who now do my will, your fallen gods before my God-King's throne shall kneel. The God of mercy, gone to dust, now metes out justice, I decree. The God of war, betrayed by blood, takes up my dread authority. The nameless God who chaos felled, bequeaths his name and power to me. The worlds within this world shall fall like every world I see. And at the end of all that is the God of death who death possessed, stands in my thrall like all the rest. Your fool's valor leaves you helpless now, and all the choices last left to you is to decide which dead god's shrine will be the final thing you see. Which dead god now defends the path to me? The God of Undeath, crowned anew. The God of death, whose name you fear. I am Acererak, and your feeble lives end here. What lies at the end of a life well lived? Eons of cold servitude, your flesh but a memory. Your every tortured thought focused on one thing only, to feed on the living. In retrospect, I might have gone a little overboard. The best traps make their prisoners suffer and scream. Adventurers who visit my tomb die too quickly, or so they say. The tallest library of Warlock's Crypt held its breath. Braziers guttered to a steady red while a sliver of the astral sea opened in the wall and exhaled a cold, glassy light that seemingly froze time around the portal. Within that light hung a skull wrought of meticulous illusion, emerald energies veining the bone as if it still remembered the heat of thought from a lich-like figure. Larlock lowered his head slightly, the iron stones above his crown drawing in like patient stars. Acererak, a tombwright, much of his past is forgotten, but ancient texts assert that he comes from a world called Earth. He hunts artifacts, mortals, and cages them, as if hearing their cries for release is dulled against his pride. Zastam stood with hands folded, voice level. We both know the tales speak of his ambition, a power enough to chase godhood as many within our form of the art aspire to. Yet, for some unspecified reason, he has no appetite for worship. A deviation among liches, although I must concede I cannot agree with his verdict on the matter. A candle that emanated the cool colours of the fugue mixed with an emerald lace shone over Larlock's left eye as he continued. Half fond, half feral. He crafted demiplanes. Despite passing up opportunities for godhood, Acererak attracted his fair share of followers and worshippers. Surprisingly, within the scriptures, it was foretold that he doesn't grant spells, nor does he give his devotees much of his precious time. Mostly, he just likes to watch them suffer and die as a result of their magical pursuits and folly in their feeble attempts of ambition to claim his throne. The souls, Tam stated, with a cool calculus. He scars them with terror, then draws them into his phylactery, its location unkindly well hidden. The trapping is what he delights most in. The tombs are the architectural basis upon which he manufactures his showpiece. Larlock's red pinpoints brightened. Not long ago, by mortal calendars, he fished an atropal from the negative plane and built a nursery, the soulmonger cradled in a crystalline cylinder, and set it in Taril's tomb of the 9 gods. Not godhood for himself, but the atropal would be his tool. Godhood as a weapon he could point upon Toril to genocide the planet. A humble articulation, but too simplistic for my designs. Larlock made a small gesture. A chain of sigils whispered awake, and a pale shape uncurled inside a prison of translucent adamant, one of the captive souls kept for study. The voice that issued was frayed, an elf once, but his eyes now unraveled to a cold grey. He spoke through the command of the Shadow King, as he gestured through a modular version of the spell, Speak with Dead. We entered that accursed tomb with the welcome of its foul attendants, each smiling and offering whispers of encouragement. Into the blackness strode 5 foolhardy adventurers, and yet only I walked out alive. Darkness swallowed the first, when eager Larian stepped boldly into the Devourer's maw. Castor sprung a wicked trap and died when a dart fusillade filled her blood with wicked poison. Algrim stepped into a glowing portal, and I can only presume he died, for the sounds of his screaming echoed all around us. And Philip, poor Philip, crumbled to dust when he looked into the skull's faceted eyes. I escaped, with my body intact, but I can't say the same for my mind. The tomb's horrors haunt me still. Acererak, cursed Lich, awaits my death, and when I die, he'll steal my soul as he did those companions I left behind in that evil place. Know this: seek not the tomb of Acererak, for there are easier ways to die. The voice guttered out, and the still silence of Warlock's crypt resumed once more, deliberate. The 2 liches glanced outside upon the marshalling of several thousand undead, who now stood in perfect formation, as if waiting for a decree from their undead overlords. Larlock glanced up, as his index finger pointed upward at the 3rd level of a decrepit bookshelf. File him correctly, Larlock concluded, not as would-be god, but as engineer of fear, the devourer, and an artifact hunter, the demiplane mason. Appropriate, Tam said, as he placed the book in the labelled section. Masters of Undeath. We will keep his page marked for a later debate. Acererak was born of the union between a Baler named Tarnhim and a human named Kasethri. Kasethri raised Acererak at the fringes of society, afraid of what might occur if the people of her town learned of her son's half-demon heritage. But they did find out, and in his 10th year, Acererak could only watch as a mob lynched his mother and burned their home to the ground. Only Acererak's inhuman nature allowed him to survive long enough to flee. The events of his life between his childhood escape and his re-emergence as a potent wielder of arcane powers are vague. Some claim that he began searching at a young age for a means of becoming undead, to escape the life he found so wretched. Other tales maintain that Acererak apprenticed with none other than Vecna himself, while the latter was still a lich and had not ascended to divinity. Whatever the truth, Acererak resurfaced as a worshipper of Orcus, using the cult's resources to construct a number of lairs and tombs, the most infamous of which would become known as the Tomb of Horrors. Some sources claim that Acererak was using Orcus's worshippers to complete his own schemes, and that he felt no true loyalty to the demon prince. During this time, Acererak relocated to Baal Turath, finding some acceptance from the tieflings, who, though connected to devils rather than demons, were more accepting of those who had mixed and otherworldly parentage. He, in turn, related to them better than he did to any other race, due to their ability to appreciate his heritage. He dwelt among them, feeling at least partly at home, but he knew that this relative peace could not last. It was during that time that he first began studying the methods and means of becoming a lich. Once he attained lichdom, Acererak ceased paying homage to Orcus, lending credence to the notion that his worship had never been more than a means to an end. He confined himself to his tomb, spending years in study and honing his powers to prepare for his ultimate triumph. Eventually, his undead body wasted away, leaving him as a demi-lich, an animated skull, and still he prepared. Slowly, Acererak allowed rumors of his tomb, and the great treasure supposedly buried there, to spread. Utilizing his tomb, the dying city of Moyle in the Shadowfell, and his fortress of Conclusion in its own pocket dimension, Acererak planned to use the souls of the world's greatest heroes to empower a ritual that would allow him to take possession of all undead throughout the planes, granting him true immortality and sufficient power to ensure that all the living would suffer as he himself had suffered. As it happened, Acererak underestimated the skill of the final group of adventurers to brave his tomb. and they were able to thwart his efforts. The Demi-Lich's ritual was disrupted. The device he used to store the soul energy was destroyed, and Acererak was all but obliterated, his essence left to float in the void between planes, powerless and helpless for all time. Or so everyone believed. Though it took him decades, Acererak resumed his physical form through sheer force of will, plotting a new scheme during that period that could potentially gain him even more power than he had before. Acererak casts a long shadow across the world, and his malign presence touches many people in places scattered across creation and beyond. From undead, spawned by his dread rituals, to the descendants of those adventurers who died in the tomb, Acererak and his legend have shaped and altered countless lives. Many dungeons fill the world, but few come close to the malice found in the Tomb of Horrors. The reputed resting place of the infamous necromancer, Acererak, the tomb has tempted many heroes and fools alike into testing their mettle against the tricks and traps protecting the tomb's fabled mithril vault. Nearly all have been found wanting. Regardless of how many descended into its labyrinthine corridors, fell victim to its innumerable hazards, or emerged, maimed or mad, the dungeon has survived, promising the same death and despair as it always has to the next band to enter its darkened corridors. The towers of Warlock's Crypt once again stood along a thin, sulking spring that welled up from beneath Larlock's own cellars, its waters slick with alchemical waste and lit from within by a sickly luminescence. At night, the little river cast an eerie, flickering light against black stone, so that the whole citadel looked as if it was illuminated by pure moonlight. Beyond the towers, the city lay as it always did, gloomy, dusty, quietly busy with the work of the undead in control of the Shadow King. Larlock watched the luminous current slide under an arch of bone and marble. Acererak knows that history has shown that even the gods can die. Tuern the war god, slain by his brother Bane. Nerul, whose throne the Raven Queen now occupies. Amoth, thrown down by Orcus, Demogorgon, and Rimmon, all seeing Semuet, whose body remains inhabited by the far realm essence Kabu Athla. And, of course, he who was murdered by rebellious Asmodeus. One day I hope to converse with the Lord of the Nine. These, and others who are lost to time, have proved that the immortal gods are nothing of the kind, and it is from this fact that he seeks to draw power. I would concur that the gods are simplistic beings that must be rewritten. None can say whether the spirits of gods pass on to an afterlife as mortals do, but the power they once held must still be present. We both understand that the Lich Eternal is determined to make that power his own. Zastam stood beside him, hands folded into his sleeves. Death is not the final arbiter. Gods perceive their level of apotheosis, a true form of cognizance. I align with Acererak's comprehension. Useful, the Shadow King agreed, turning from the spring to a hovering pane of light on which an emerald skull diagram rotated. Speaking of clarity to the narrative of Acererak, your message said his newest structures are expanded arcane engines. Eldritch Engines, Tam said. Acererak has spent years preparing himself, performing rituals, ensuring that the stars are aligned. And during this time in history, those engines were focused upon building a new god's body. They contained devices of alchemical and arcane nature, focused to sap the power of gods strewn through the astral sea, all finalizing with a single purpose: to channel this eldritch energy to Acererak for his rise to divinity. Each engine also contained enough traps, puzzles, and monsters to keep meddling fools, especially those of the adventurer variety that has plagued him in the past, from learning the truth of the engine's purpose. Or so, that was what he planned, and we both know that did not come to be. Acererak, after all, has his own way of doing things. Tam's gaze went to a basin of ancient Netherese design, a pattern circumnavigated around the circumference, a mural of floating mountain ranges on the western face, and ruins of cities on the eastern. Do you consider him a threat to the art? Not yet. If he turns from siphoning leavings to rewriting laws, I will shorten his time on this plane, stated Larloch. When Acererak made his most recent attempt at seizing absolute power, his staging ground was Moyle, the city that waits. A maze of ruined towers extending down to the deepest depths of the Shadowfell, Moyle provided a fertile ground for undead experimentation, as well as an access point to the Demolich's great fortress of conclusion. Held within an extra-dimensional space of pure necrotic essence, this fortress served as the site of Acererak's planned divine apotheosis, a process by which the mastery of undeath would grant him godlike power. However, great heroes destroyed both Acererak's plans and his sanctum. As with its Dreadmaster, though, mere heroes could not forever stop the power of the Fortress of Conclusion. To most folk of the world, the gods are transcendent beings, ultimately powerful and uniquely immortal. Those who have a strong grasp of ancient history know a forbidden truth. Even gods can die. These lost deities are known to sages and scholars who study the history and lore of the Dawn War, the Blood War, and the Astral Sea. Tuern, Amath, Kala, Semuet, Neril, all gods who fell in battle or were slain by usurpers. Asmodeus murdered he who was, a god whose name is now lost, and the divine ranks of the dead include countless others fallen beyond the memory of even their fellow immortals. The astral dominion of Pluton is a wasteland whose name is known to many, but whose dark history is understood by only few. The dominion of Neril, god of the dead, was a realm of lavish excess and extreme suffering, where the deity, also known as the Reaper, bound souls to his service. When Nerul was slain by the mortal sorcerer who claimed his power and became the Raven Queen, Pluton was abandoned and fell to ruin. A host of undead still dwell here, and the tombs of the Dominion hold rich treasure and lore. But the divine power of the Reaper has long since been lost. Or so it was thought. Pluton was the site of Acererak's final Eldritch Engine, the construction of which occupied his feverish efforts since the destruction of the Shadow Engine disrupted his plans long ago. The Demi-Lich's phylactery contained the incalculable eldritch energy channeled by his previous engines and drained from the abandoned tomb. With that power, Acererak intended to tap into the shrines of dead gods, draining away their spiritual essence where it permeated the astral sea. By drawing on the souls of dead gods, the Demi-Lich hoped to attain godhood, or greater power. When infused with the immortal might of Neril and the other gods who died before him, through means unknown, Acererak survived with his phylactery intact, and whether he recreated his phylactery or it was never truly destroyed is unknown. After this time in history, he reassumed his original Lich form and began a plan of revenge, then finding his way to Toril. Omu's bloody trials drew the attention of Acererak, who at that time wandered the cosmos in search of souls to harvest. Acererak, who was fond of death traps, marveled at the trials concocted by the Omuans. They inspired him to create his own dungeon below the city. A little over a century ago, Acererak entered Omu and slew all 9 trickster gods. He then enslaved the Omuans and forced them to carve out a tomb for their defeated gods. When the tomb was complete, Acererak murdered the Omuans and sealed them in the tomb with their false gods. The Arch-Lich resumed his odyssey across the plains, content that the dungeon would feed his phylactery with the souls of dead adventurers. The jungle reclaimed Omu, and it fell into ruin. Acererak discovered the remnants of a stillborn godling, an atropal, in the negative plane and carried it to Chult, where he placed it in the tomb of the 9 gods. Next, he created an eldritch machine called the Soulmonger, which captured the souls of the dead from across Faerun and fed them to the Atropal to restore its strength. Acererak's plan was to feed the undead godling until it grew powerful enough to become a god, at which point he would unleash it upon Toril to genocide the planet. Unfortunately, and despite having a sphere of annihilation at his command, Acererak was once again defeated by a small band of powerful adventurers. His phylactery was intact in a private demiplane, hidden from even the gods, and he survived yet again. What lies at the end of a life well lived? Eons of cold servitude, your flesh but a memory, your every tortured thought focused on one thing only, to feed on the living. The God of Undeath, crowned anew, the God of Death whose name you fear. I am Acererak, and your feeble lives end here.